Alright guys, welcome back to Conqueror and Commander. Today we're going to be going over my Titania Protector of Argoth deck. Eventually I'm going to make an article for this and it's going to be posted at puremtgo.com. So keep checking over there for Conqueror and Commander. What I'll do is when the article actually gets posted, I will post a link in the video description so that you can go there for a written list of the deck in case you're interested in looking at it. Alright, getting right to it. Titania is a legendary creature, and she's probably the one that piqued my interest the most over the past year, and that's why I wanted to build a deck around her. You know, she's basically got reverse landfall, which means that anytime a a land is put into the graveyard, you get a dude. So she's essentially a rampaging Baloths. One of the things that you kind of forget about sometimes when you're playing with her is that every time you cast her and she enters the battlefield, you get to return a land from your graveyard onto the battlefield. So what this means is that we're going to want to use a lot of fetch lands, and we're going to want to make sure we use a fetch land before actually casting Titania. She's just good at recursion of lands as well. So essentially, like, you're going to make a bunch of creature tokens and you're going to want to go nuts with them, and Titania is a lot of fun in doing that. So let's just take a look at the various categories that I have going for this deck right now. Considering that you are going to be making a ton of dudes, you want to make sure that they get through, because they only have 3 toughness. And so sometimes it's going to be easier just to throw a bunch of chump blockers in front of them. The 2 easiest ways of doing this is by using Bellowing Tangleworm, which gives Intimidate, and Akroma's Memorial, which also gives Haste and Flying and all that other good stuff. Both of these have their issues. You know, the Memorial obviously gets a very large target on it when it comes into play, but it's something that obviously is good enough, and you're going to have enough ramp that you're going to be able to cast it every time you can do it. The Tangleworm, if you go up against another green-based token deck, won't be as helpful as well. But, you know, there's a lot of people that are running mono black out there. I considered adding Craterhoof Behemoth, but then it would just turn into every other token deck that that you can get out there. So I decided to stay away from that. That's just a personal choice. If you wanted to make the deck more competitive, I would add Craterhoof Behemoth. Since this is a landfall-based, or a deck that does like landfall, obviously you're going to want to have Rampaging Baloths in there, and Avenger of Zendikar. While I did avoid Craterhoof Behemoth, Avenger of Zendikar was just good enough that I enjoyed playing with him and having him out there and making a ton of dudes. And with the amount of fetch lands in the deck, he ends up working out very well. Alright. I really only have 2 tutors in the deck for creatures. Green Sun Zenith and Survival of the Fittest. With Survival, usually I include Genesis, but for some reason I didn't use that in this deck. And it worked alright for me. I'll be honest, there were times where I kind of wanted Court of Calling in the deck over Green Sun Zenith, just for the ability to pull stuff out at instant speed. But Green Sun Zenith worked well as well. I also included Rings of Brighthearth, and I'll be honest, I haven't drawn it yet, and I'm not sure just how good it would be. Obviously, it'll work well with all the fetch lands and stuff like that, and there are some planeswalkers. So, and there are some other activated abilities in the deck as well. There's an argument to be made that you should use Straonic Resonator, but the repeatability of Rings of Brighthearth is why I included it in the deck. Now, when you do have a commander like Titania, occasionally you're not going to have fetch lands coming out all the time. In which case, you're going to want sacrifice outlets for your lands, or at least ways to destroy your lands. Usually you will have fetch lands, because I put a crap ton of fetch lands in here, but for those times where you want to sacrifice lands, there's Natural Balance, which is like the quote-unquote fair Armageddon. People still didn't like this card, but you know what? It brings everybody down to like 5 lands, and it works great with Titania out there. Scape Shift is another one where you can sacrifice a bunch of lands to get a bunch of fetch lands, to sacrifice those fetch lands to get more lands. It's a nice way just to get a whole bunch of dudes out at once. Squirrel Wrangler is a card that I think is like everybody's Titania deck, and it actually works out well because although it requires an activated cost, you do get a pretty good bonus out of it. You get extra dudes for sacrificing your lands. I enjoyed this guy a lot. Ambush Commander is another one where you can actually turn your forests into guys, so that if your forests die in combat, you're going to get an elemental as well. Just keep in mind you should always make sure you have 2 mana up so that you can sacrifice the commander in response to something like Wrath of God, so you don't destroy all your forests. Unless, of course, Titania's out there. There is the possibility with a Titania deck to run like a sort of Living Lands type deck, but Ambush Commander is really the only card that I used. Sylvan Safekeeper is awesome because he's a free sacrifice outlet. There's no cost associated with sacrificing the land, and he protects your guys. Constant Mists, I drew it a couple times. I never really used it. However, it does give the possibility of fogging repeatedly. You can use it on opponents' turns to help out other opponents in case they work out. And so I thought it was worth using. It didn't come in handy the few times I drew it, but that's just me. Now, of course, you have to have some removal if you're going to play the game. So I've got Bramble Crush, Acidic Slime, Beast Within, Frailus, who worked out really well. I guess she could also be considered ramp, but I used her mainly for her destruction abilities, and then, you know, pumping out elves when I needed it. So she was really good. I enjoyed her tremendously. There's Oblivion Stone. Lignify is only in here because I do not own Song of the Dryads at the time, but it's literally my only creature removal in the deck. There's also Reclamation Sage and Nature's Claim. So yes, the deck is very light on creature removal. This is one of those decks where you're just going to want to stomp the people that have more creatures than you, or hopefully somebody else deals with creatures. The deck is also not as... it has no ways of really dealing with flyers as well. Duplicate's a way to include, you know, a creature in here that can you can probably tutor up with survival in order to deal with flyers. I'll be honest, the deck isn't made to be the most competitive deck. It's made to be fun, and at least I thought it was fun. I've got a decent amount of recursion in here to get lands back and other things as well. So we've got Groundskeeper, Crucible of Worlds, Cartographer, and Tilling Treefolk, Eternal Witness, Life from the Loam. They're going to be sacrificing a bunch of lands. Life from the Loam is going to be awesome for you. I did not include any cycling lands because my card draw ended up being decent enough for me. You may feel otherwise. It's up to you. We've also got Regrowth, which is, you know, straight up one. Sudden Reclamation. The creature count is kind of low in the deck. There's only like 20 creatures, so you know, it didn't always come in handy for that part, but there was always land in the deck, and it's an instant speed way to grab land from your stuff. Praetor's Council, always awesome, and then Creeping Renaissance, usually to get lands. Card draw, we have stuff like Seer Sundial, Greater Good, Harmonize, Sylvan Library, Regal Force, Lifeblood Hydra, who was actually pretty good, you know. Typically I'd be able to get 5 counters on him or something like that. And people didn't really want to block him because they didn't want me to draw cards, so I enjoyed it. Shamanic Revelation seems perfect for this deck. I never drew it. I haven't drawn it yet, so I don't know, maybe it'll change. And then Primal Hunter, who is pretty good at drawing cards. Usually he's a 5 mana for 5 cards, but oftentimes you can put dudes out on the battlefield. Since this is a green deck, we are going to deal with a lot of ramp. So we've got Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, Edge of Autumn, which can be a sacrifice outlet. Lotus Cobra goes with the landfall theme. Nature's Lore, Securve Tribe Elder, Cultivate Harrow, which is also a sacrifice. Kodama's Reach, Yavimaya Elder, Realms Uncharted. Usually with Realms Uncharted, I would just get 4 fetch lands, unless I needed something specific. Druidic Satchel, it was fine. I wouldn't say it was great, but it was fine. Crop Rotation almost always got Gaia's Cradle. Explorer, Sylvan's Scrying. Realm Seekers. Usually what happened with Realm Seekers, I'd cast him, he'd be like a 10-10, and then he would die before I'd be able to use him. So he seemed like he'd be good because people got scared of him. So there you go. Oracle of Modiah, the original Garrick, Burgeoning and Exploration. Both of these cards and Azusa are good for when you're drawing a bunch of stuff. Obviously, there's times where they're dead cards, but whatever. And then Nissa, who I have yet to draw as well. She kind of goes with the Living Lands theme, but she also does a little bit of ramp with untapping for forests. And her ultimate is good as well. So, those are the non-land cards in the deck. There are 38 lands in the deck. As I said, there's a large majority of sacrifice lands. The panoramas, all 3 panoramas. Deserted Temple is good with Gaia's Cradle, so I had to include it. Dust Bowl is a nice sacrifice outlet, as well as being able to deal with pesky problematic lands. Evolving Wilds is another one. Gaia's Cradle, of course, if you're making dudes, is good. Panorama, Rainforest, Panorama, Oran Reef. Petrified Field was awesome because you could sacrifice it to go get a fetch land or something like that. And it's also good at getting stuff like Gaia's Cradle out of your graveyard. There are 18 basics in here. I did have at least one game where I was able to grab every single basic out of my deck. And then you're like, well, what do you do after that if you've got fetch lands? Well, you just keep getting your fetch lands and you sacrifice them to make dudes. Basically, they're free guys if you've got Titania out there. Even if you can't search for anything, you can still sacrifice them. Let's see. Scroll down with my lands here. Strip Mine and Tectonic Edge are good because they sacrifice themselves to destroy stuff. Terminal Moraine, Terramorphic Expanse. Thawing Glaciers was iffy. Wasn't 100% sure on this one. I never drew it, so I'm still not sure. Some more fetch lands. Vesuva, fetch land, and then Yavimaya. So, that's the deck. Like I said, it's not super competitive, but it's a lot of fun for me. Early on in my process, I considered doing more of a living land type theme. Excuse me. And I wanted to include stuff like Liege of the Tangle. Just because he was big and goofy. And other stuff that would turn all your dudes or lands into dudes. I kind of moved away from that, and but that's definitely a possibility with Titania. There's also kind of some other stuff that I considered, where like overlaid terrain. That seems like it's super ballsy. It's just I don't know if it's necessary because really you're sacrificing all your lands. All right. Well, that's great. Number one, if you have Titania out, and number two, if all your lands have haste. So all your elementals have haste. So you'd need Concordant Crossroads in your deck, but that's really only 2 haste outlets, neither of which are tutorable in the deck, if you include Concordant Crossroads and Akrona's Memorial. And then there's the possibility of the blowout where somebody deals with your terrain or something like that. It's super ballsy. Good for you guys if you run it. I decided not to use it. there's a variety of other stuff that I kind of went through and it didn't really make the cut. The Woodcrasher, the Landfall. There's Landfall stuff that didn't quite make the cut. Where is the Baloth Woodcrasher? There he is. I really wanted to fit this guy in, but he just didn't seem like, I don't know. He could be good, but he's just a dude. Is really what it comes down to. He didn't really bring any. Yes, it's possible to make him a 12/12 or something like that. Yes, I really wanted him. If there was one creature that I would want to get back in here, it would be him. Other things that I considered were additional ways to make sure that my all my elementals got through. So I considered adding Nylea, God of the Hunt, because she gives them all trample, and you can pump dudes. Indestructible God, always good. Another one I thought of was Champion of Lamholt. The champion would ideally come out, and then you'd make a bunch of dudes, and then they'd all be unblockable. The problem with the champion for me was that I would have situations where I would have already a bunch of dudes, I'd already made all my tokens, and then I'd draw the champion. The champion at that point doesn't really do a whole lot for you. She's got to be built up. So your mileage may vary if you include her. And then finally, there's the bigger, badder Craterhoof Behemoth, who, of course, is super powerful and awesome. You know what? More power to you if you want to run them. On top of that, there's all the overruns and overwhelming stampedes and stuff like that you could run. Alright guys, that's the deck. Hopefully you enjoyed looking at it. Ideally I might start making new decks, or I might be showing vids with old decks, you never know. But let me know what you think of the deck. Appreciate it. Thanks guys.